Hi, and welcome back to the Insights podcast. I am here with Phil Baarda. How are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm great, Barry. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for inviting me along
Thanks
to.
very much for joining me. Uh, um, I thought I would just start with the first question, which was, what inspired you to write this piece, Bone Caveman?
Uh, what inspired me was been listening to quite a few audio drama podcast type of things where there was a body that had been found under mysterious circumstances, and then there's a whole chain of events through police investigations and finding previous associates and friends that could piece together this sort of conundrum. And these are real life things. And there's a couple of those that I sort of come across. And I thought, okay, how about doing one that's fictional, but has some sort of resemblance to what could be a true life crime, as it were, and crime in inverted quotes, because in this case, it's not a crime. I don't think it's what happened to the poor guy that was found. So it's really just playing around with that. And I like the idea of different voices coming from different aspects of the whole, if you like, and giving their part of the investigation, the story, and then the audience trying to piece it together.
What was the central theme or message you wanted to convey throughout the work that you created with Bone Caveman?
Essentially, I think it is what circumstances, what level of disappointment with the world, or what degree of mental imbalance or disturbance you might have to want to willingly drill holes in your skull, thinking that might be a way out of whatever turmoil you're in. So it was that. What would make you drill holes in your head, basically?
How did you develop the characters in the story?
And that sounds sort of quite gruesome. Why would you drill holes in your head? It sounds outrageous. It's not. Yes. But once I've started to think about that idea, it's I'd seen various museum skulls which had holes drilled in their skull through ancient rituals or ancient medicine. And whilst it sounds really destructive, it's not necessarily. Obviously, if you drill right down into the brain, that could be fatal. But if you're just taking away, if you're just taking away the skull without actually getting into the brain, that has happened for millennia, and there are numerous examples of museums across the world where this has happened. And what's more, it didn't kill the person because you find that the burn has actually healed over. So there's something in this idea of drilling a hole in your head to release demons or spirits, or maybe just pressure from some sort of trauma where you've fallen over or fallen down the cliff trying to get to your birds' eggs for sustenance as a hunter gatherer and so on. So I was thinking about this sort of an idea. If one wanted to drill holes in your head to relieve yourself from some spiritual turmoil, mental disturbance, what sort of person would that be? So just sort of drilling someone that's very self-reflective, disappointed with life, finding that not everything is as it is with other people. It's that, not quite the fear of missing out, but it's the idea that other people's lives are better than your own. Why isn't your life as good as other people's? And comparing yourself, continually thinking that actually I'm not good enough, and I'll never be good enough, no matter what I try to do to make myself feel good enough. And that was the central sort of. Well, I suppose there's two characters really. The guy who died, which we don't know about really, but we pieced together that, and also the guy Johnny, who actually found him in the bone caves, usually down, and then the journey that he went through to sort of hear about the truth behind that, and his own journey as well.
So once you had that character, the main character, and I suppose drilling a hole through the skill, then it was about placing the other characters round about that main one in the play, I suppose.
Yeah, indeed. So there's this idea of having like, supporting characters. It's fine having a conundrum, dead guy with holes in his head, someone that found him. Why would Johnny be there? Who would he be with? Who would his friends be? Who would help him on one hand try to find out about the truth of this dead guy's life and the holes in his head, and who might try to hinder him in that as well. So it's almost like having contrasts in characters where there's sort of a good angel and a devil, both sort of on Johnny's shoulder, and then the outsider, so the outsider characters, which are the police officer and so on, that are actually piecing together the purely dead man, as opposed to Johnny, who obviously they don't know about, other than he was the guy who found the dead man in the cave.
Tell me about the locations in the play, because reading it and now listening to it, it's obviously based in Scotland, but I think what you convey really lovely is the locations within Scotland and within the storytelling. Can you tell us more about that?
Bone caves. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Barry, but I would urge anyone who's in Assynt to take a trip to Bone caves, because they are reasonably accessible. They're out in Sudan, just 20 or so miles north of Liverpool, on the way to Achmelvik. But they're 2 mile walk in, 2 mile walk back, but they are really quite intriguing, really quite special, and often there are very, very few people, so you get the sense of otherworldliness. And Assynt itself, as a region, it's limestone. There's lots of crags and craters and pits and depressions and big areas of rock. On the way to walking to the Burn Cave, there's a river which disappears into the riverbed in sort of low water, and then it bubbles back up again further downstream. So you've got this whole idea of flows and disappearances and so on. And then you get up to the Burn Caves, and there's 1 or 2 openings, and they are really quite inspiring and super place to be. Very remote, but relatively accessible, if that makes sense. And each time I'm in the area, I try to not quite do a pilgrimage there, but I try to go there because I just found them quite special. And from that was this idea of linking the bone caves to the idea of like the brain as well, and the bone caves may be having some trouble and turmoil in the past as well, and have blocked passages. This history of stuff happening in the bone caves, which is having sort of like your own mental history and so on as well, and trying to unblock that. So the place and the story sort of gelled off each other.
There's a variety of characters in the play. Do you have a favourite? And if so, why?
I do quite like the archaeologist, actually. Having a science background myself, actually, there's it's in all walks in life, but you do come across some quite nerdy people. Often scientists are maybe, I'm not trying to be too disparaging about scientists as a whole, but you come across some quite nerdy people, and I have come across some quite nerdy people, and I just like that sort of that really enthusiastic nerdiness. So it's the lecture archaeologist, where she goes on about, my interest is in paleo botanical aspects of that, and it just sort of throws people. But it's just quite comical. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to see that there is people's enthusiasms can take them away from other people in some ways, and maybe leave people behind.
One of the things that I noticed about the play was the inclusion of the quote from Theo. Can you tell us what inspired you to include that quote?
Well, yeah, that's the the Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching, is a Chinese text from millennia ago. I think it's pre-Confucian, so it's quite an ancient text. But it's not the Bible, but it is a way of people who are into this idea of Taoism, the oneness, the whole of everything, may get some sort of a meaning to life, and because of that, it seemed to be quite mystical as well. It was taken up in the 60s of this alternative way, and it became something of an alternative thing where Chinese people, Asian people in the last millennia have taken it as not mystical. Of course, it is. It's just their way of life. And I was trying to get this idea of trying to find meaning. So the poor guy that died with holes in his head was trying to find meaning and looked at Western way of trying to get that meaning, didn't find it. So he went on a physical journey around the world to try to find some sort of meaning to that, where he was in Mongolia, South America, and so on as well. And the Tao Te Ching would be something he would pick up on, trying to get meaning into his own life.
What was the purpose of the trepanation element of the narrative within the play?
I think it's because it's gruesome, really. It's on all sorts of levels. You think drilling holes through the skull. Whilst obviously that happens now, it's happened in the past, but why would you want to do it to yourself as well? And it's just a really gruesome thing. And I've read accounts where people have actually done it to themselves as not necessarily to relieve bad spirits or bad humours, or not because they've got a swelling brain and they need to relieve pressure, but they've actually done it to try to get some sort of a recreational high from it, which intellectually you can guess that if you've got a brain that's pulsing away and it's sort of constrained in the skull, if we remove part of that skull, then the brain can pulse slightly more where the skull is not retaining it, and you get an advanced level of blood flow and sensation. And wow, to go to that length to have a recreational high, which potentially is going to be fairly short-lived as well, because you'll get used to that sort of extraness. So then you'd have to do it again to get the same sort of recreational high experience from that. And that could be a spiral as well. Anything else? It just really is intellectually, it's a dreadful thing to do, but medically, it's probably an essential thing to do. It's just like any other procedure. And as I say, if it's done properly, your brain grows back, and your skull grows back, and there's no long-term effects at all, and it's actually healing. And you think there's two things of it being gruesome and dreadful and healing at the same time.
I think importantly within this play, there's elements of exploration around about mental health and self-destructive behaviours. How did you approach these? And I suppose it's quite an important question, because I think that's a main thing nowadays about looking after your mental health. And you write so beautifully about both. And I suppose the main character's self-destruction, about his mental health, which leads to this cause. How did you come up with that structure and plan to just write about it, which is lovely throughout the play?
Yeah, well, I suppose we all have issues with mental health. Everyone does, to a greater or lesser degree, and quite often we are our own agents of the acceleration of that, or the advancement into sort of deeper mental health issues. We're all more or less addicted to certain things that we know are not necessarily good for us. We may overeat because we like chocolate. We may sit and watch TV when in fact we should get up and walk around. So there's all sorts of things that we do knowing that they're not good for us. We smoke, we drink, all those sorts of things. Quite often because it's easier to do that than the more positive alternative. And also because we might be maybe scared in some ways of confronting the alternative, which is to try to in fact, heal ourselves or improve ourselves or make ourselves feel more easy. And it's often very, very hard to do the right thing. Very hard to do the right thing physically, very hard to do the right thing mentally as well. To a great lesser extent, we all do that. There are very many things that I would rather do than mindfulness, say, or go for a run. There's many, many things I'd rather do. So we tend to want to willingly destroy ourselves, if you like, to a greater or lesser degree. Some of us are more resilient, and we can destroy ourselves more than other people. Sometimes it's just an extra thing, just tips us slightly further on, and it's a very hard balance. And yet, from my own personal perspective, I do things that I shouldn't do, and I know that I do things that I shouldn't do because I enjoy it, even though I know the long-term consequences of that are destructive. It's that curious sort of good angel, bad devil type of thing, and it's often the bad devil that wins out.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's that, oh, I could go a bar of chocolate today. One of the things that I really loved in the play was the postcards and the messages that they contained. What was the significance of this small detail within the play? I really liked it. I just thought I would ask the question.
Yeah, I quite like that. I suppose it's if you're looking back on it in a sort of a rightly clinical way, it's a device, really, in that Dao Ching was part of the process that the police inspector looked at to see where the dead hero, if you like, was sort of coming from and what his interests were. But it was to try to get this idea of the dead man who went to South America, we think, to drill holes in his head, could actually be located in South America. So he was actually there. And whilst he wasn't actually saying, I've gone to get surgery to have this operation done to me twice, he was hinting at that through things in the Dao Ching as the way that he was trying to get enlightenment. And so one of the postcards talks about going to a caldera, which is an extinct volcano. That's, sort of a rightly sort of way. That's quite a nice sort of metaphor for the bone caves themselves being blocked up caves, which were then sort of dug out and air would release through the tunnel. And the caldera as well, a volcano that's hasn't erupted for a long time, somehow blocked, could well become an active volcano just by an unblockage. So there's a little bit of a rightly sort of stuff in there just to intellectually make a link. But also as well, it's just a nice thought that our poor dead guy with 2 holes in his head would actually be sending postcards to someone that he'd made some sort of connection with on a retreat down in England. So there's that physicality of location, but also it serves the theme as well.
What do you hope audiences will take away from Bone Caveman?
I just hope people are entertained. I hope that people might be slightly puzzled, perhaps. Maybe as well think about themselves, oneself. What are the destructive things that you do yourself that you think are right that might not actually be right? And again, it's going back to this idea of doing things that are wrong because they feel good. It's trying to think about that sort of self-realization. Okay, how much is too much feeling good, as it were? You cannot go off and drink every single night for years and years and years without there being consequences. Some people do. Some people do that and stop. some people don't do that. And it's what's the level, what's the threshold, what's the balance in your own life as to the end point of feeling good in a spiritual and like quasi enlightened way and happy in yourself.
Written as a theatre play, Bone Caveman is going to be featured in Stories from the Grey Hill podcast. What does it mean to you to have your work performed in an audio format for a wider audience?
Audio is great. I like audio very much. It's something that's a lot easier to write than a stage play or a screenplay. In that you can, it's often said an audio play is an individual thing, but the actual pictures in your mind are more real than you can realise on the stage or whatever. So they are your own pictures. They're not something that a designer or stage manager has tried to, director has tried to put to you. It's completely your own interpretation of the sounds and the dialects. I really like that idea that everybody listening to this will have a very different picture in their own minds of what it's like. And I quite like that idea. So there's everything is different for everybody. I do quite like that. I think about audio as well is that it's often downloadable, so you can sort of virtually anywhere. Whereas a stage play, almost by itself, is a one-off thing in its set place, and you can't necessarily recapture exactly that same thing again anywhere else.
How do you create relatable characters in your writing?
I don't know, actually. I suppose I try not to analyse it too much because it might not work the next time if it's overthinking. But I think it's just trying to get people who are maybe inspired by people that you know, people that you've come across, or maybe bits of yourself, bits of your family. Trying to make the characters it's like human. It's like everyone's got flaws and got good bits as well. And nobody's perfect at all, no matter how many times people say I'm perfect. They're not, of course they're not. And I quite like that you can be flawed and do some really dreadful things, but you can be very likable and charismatic, and people can go with you. So I like this idea of charisma, I think, in characters, despite or because of what they've done.
What is your writing process, and do you have any unique habits or routines?
No, I don't. My writing process is deadlines. I like deadlines because deadlines make you write. If there's no deadline, then the actual physical writing is limited. Once the deadline approaches, there's more writing on the page. But most of my writing actually is in my head. Actually, when I first wrote, I would come up with a scene or a character or an idea, and I'd write it, plop, and then get stuck because I haven't really thought about, okay, who is this character, what they're trying to do, what are the conflicts, and so on, beyond the initial germ of the scene, and I would get stuck. And I suppose that's what we call writer's block, is that you don't know what you're going to write next. So I do spend an awful lot more time now thinking about not necessarily the specifics of what I'm going to write, but about how the characters and how they may interact with each other and any sort of thing that happens to them. If this happened in a plot, how would they react to that? And then that sort of sparks idea in my head, and then it's so much easier then when you're actually sitting down to write, and then keep writing and keep writing. And there's one thing I really do like is Ernest Hemingway, to see sort of in sort of a name dropping sort of way, but in his novel, I think it was Moveable Feast, where he was writing about his time in Paris, where he would stand up in cafes and write. He would say he would write until he knew what he was going to write next. So he would often finish writing mid-sentence so that the next time he picked up his notebook, he would then be able to finish the sentence and carry on because he knew what to start with when he wrote next. And I think actually that's pretty good. It's you've got to know what you're going to write, otherwise you just stay at the blank page, which is terrifying.
How do your personal experiences or background influence the way that you write?
I suppose I draw on them quite a lot. Not necessarily verbatim, but some things I use. I suppose all writers do that. We all use bits of our life. We all use bits of ourselves, whether consciously or not. And so we do. We're always looking for people experiences, and it's helpful to have a good memory, I suppose. Because I remember things from my. It's getting worse now as I'm getting older, but I can remember certain things from my childhood, which I think actually that's quite a good thing to write about. So yeah, it's just trying to be interested in life, and I suppose in your own life in some ways, if that's not too self-important. In that all writers, in effect, don't necessarily write about themselves, but they write of themselves. And so you've got to be very tuned, I think, to lots of stuff happening around you, which then can be used as material, or if not at the time, then maybe years hence it has some sort of connection with something you're thinking.
Maybe a difficult question, but how do you handle criticism of your work?
I don't mind criticism, but I am very clear about dissociating myself from the words on the page and me. And whilst I may have written some words on the page, if those words on the page don't work, people criticise those words. It's the words that they're criticising and not me. So it's just trying to keep that complete separation. That if someone says, "What does this mean?" or "I don't like this," it's not you personally attacking, it's what you've written on the page. And that's quite liberating, because you can then dissociate yourself from it as well by saying, "Oh, yes, if that's not clear, then therefore I need to do something else." So it's not personal attack, and that's how we get through it.
What was the first book that influenced you?
It's a tricky one, because I've always been a reader ever since I was 7 or 8 or 9. I used to read lots of, showing my age considerably, sort of Enid Blyton books, which are rollicking good things. All of them, Secret Seven, Famous 5, all of them. And that progressed into Alfred Hitchcock, who wrote some really good mystery stories.
How do you find time to write, and what is your preferred time of day to write?
I write whenever I can. I don't think I've got a set time or preferred time. My body clock, I've found, is changing, and throughout my life. I used to be very much a very early morning person. Now I'm not. And while some writers say, "Yeah, first thing in the morning, write," I can't do that. So I can't now. I could. So I tend to write when I just seem to have time. And a good piece of advice I had was that if you have time to write and you just sit there expecting the muse to descend on your shoulder and then transport you, that's not going to happen. You've got to half an hour, and you know what you're going to write. Use that time to write, and write in that half an hour. Because if you're waiting for some fantastic inspiration, it may come when you start to write and think, "Oh yes, this is where it's going," after 5 or 10 minutes. But if you don't do that, then it won't. And then you're sort of staring at, say, the blank page, wasting your time, because you're not actually doing anything. You're not even thinking. You're just stuck.
If you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self as a writer?
I think be maybe more out there. And the reason I say that is that when I've been in groups and clubs and things, I was always very very slow or very resistant to sharing any of my work. And so consequently, I didn't tend to put it out very much for others to look at. It had to be, I felt there was a very high bar for that sort of sharing or or sending out. In hindsight, looking back at some of the peers in those groups, my writing was at least as good as theirs, if not better in some cases. And I should have had more confidence earlier to be putting things out and sharing and maybe doing a bit more with things. So there's a balance of putting too much out and getting, thinking that you're really, really good when in fact you're not. And I've come across that in other people quite a lot. But if it's the best you can possibly do, rather than the first draft of what you can do, then get it out there, get it shared, and you'll make connections. People will start to say, actually, that's quite good, and then you'll start to get a little more well known, and you'll meet the right friends, the right people by doing it.
What was the best investment you made as a writer? As an example, someone's bought a typewriter, someone else has bought a really nice notepad and pen. What has been the best thing that you've bought to help you as a writer?
Best thing is slightly more virtual than that. It's Final Draft software. And I know that's it's often quite expensive, but I got a bursary some time ago for an educational project, and I used the last little bit of money to get Final Draft, and I'm finding it so useful. Whereas before, I used to write things longhand and lots of bits of scraps of paper, and because we're all tight now, my writing was getting worse and worse and worse, and I couldn't actually read quite a lot of what I was writing easily. Writing by hand is a lot slower than typing. Final Draft is really, really good. There's lots of different templates. You can create your own. It's fairly intuitive. If you do a screenplay, for example, it will put the names in for you as you go along. So it's very, very quick. But better than that, it's got something sort of behind the page, which is the beat board, which is like virtual post-it notes. So you can write things on these beats, these post-it notes, and you could slide them into the pages that you're planning in whatever it is you're working on, whether it's radio play or screenplay. So when you're back into the writing, page 5 has ping, this is what's going to happen, this is the beats, and that's just so helpful. It's all in one place. Obviously, it's been online. You can use it on many machines, virtually anywhere if you've got an internet connection, rather than have to have sheaves and sheets of paper with scroll all over it, which you can't navigate very well. It's a Final Draft for me.
Can you talk about your early writing experience and when you decided to become a writer professionally?
Yeah, I suppose it was a gradual thing, really, but I've always been a reader. And even in school, I was primary school, secondary school, I was quite good at writing essays and that sort of thing. I wouldn't say they're necessarily creative, but I was fluid enough to be able to make sense. I think the epiphany I had was in the days of when we used to write letters to each other rather than text or email. And I remember a former girlfriend's father happened to be reading a letter that I'd sent to my girlfriend at the time. And I was in the room, and he said, "Oh, he does write a very good letter, doesn't he?" I thought, well, that's quite nice. That's nice. So I'll have that. I don't think there's anything compromising there at all, but there must be enough of a charisma about the writing that he quite liked. And I thought that's quite nice. So I thought, okay, that's gave me the impetus and the confidence to think, actually, maybe some of the poetry that I've been writing might be okay. I might be able to share it and so on and so on.
Can you share a memorable experience you had while writing one of your plays?
Yes, I was having a rehearsed reading of a place about 10 or 12 years ago now, where it was through a project up here in Inverness, and there were 4 actors assigned to my piece, which was a stage play, but there was only 3 actors worth of characters, if you like. So there was a 4th actor that didn't really have any lines. But there were sufficient stage directions in the play for this 4th actor to do the stage direction. And whilst that might have seemed a bit of a slight sort of thing, those stage directions were read in such a way that they were absolutely hilarious. And they actually were far better than the actual dialogue and things in the play itself. And that made me think, actually, well, anything, get a good actor, then anything can be turned into something good. If you've got good lines, it'd be even better, but a good actor is key.
What inspires you the most as a writer, and what does literary success mean to you?
Well, I suppose subject matter-wise, lots of things to do. There's always lots of connections with all sorts of things which may not seem to be obvious connections. It's like this idea of having an idea and then maybe do a little bit of thinking, a bit of research, and then, oh, that chimes to something else, and then it goes back to something in your childhood, say, and then it can snowball into something that's very different to the initial idea. But it's something. There's something there. I quite like this idea of, in effect, you're creating something out of either nothing or not very much. And I quite like that. Quite like that. And success, I suppose, is it's fellow writers liking what they're doing. That's good. To have someone that you admire say, Phil, that's really good. That's really good lively writing. That does mean an awful lot, much more than a family member saying, "Oh, I really enjoyed that," because of course they're saying that for you rather than for the writing itself. So your peers as writers, if they praise you, that is actually inspiration.
Name a book that changed your perspective on something in life.
I'd rather go by The Tin Drum by Wintergrass. I mentioned that before, but it's a bizarre thing where a boy refuses to grow, plays a tin drum, has a very high-pitched voice, can shatter glass, becomes part of a circus, which can then subvert the current politics and things happening at the time, and is also very successful with women. And you think, actually, all of these things just seem to be so bizarre and so outlandish that they're just, and yet so real as well. And I suppose it's they're not quite caricatures, but they're aspects of our own personalities and other people's personalities, and it's the aspects which are writ large, the character traits that are writ large rather than the actual characters themselves. I just love that sort of mashing together of things where anything can be possible, and you can actually create really, really sort of memorable, good stories from very bizarre things, and yet make them believable. That is super.
What type of experience do you want your listeners and audiences to have while listening to Bone Caveman?
I suppose, first of all, it's just entertainment. So I want people to be entertained, and I want people to listen to it to the end as well. Some bits are quite funny, some bits less so. So I want people to be moved and to laugh appropriately.
What other activities do you engage in when you're not writing? What's your hobbies?
Quite a lot of stuff that I do, rather, I fill my time quite well. I think I'm I suppose I'm a musician. I've got a guitar. I've recently got myself a ukulele. I play around. I can improvise reasonably well, and I just enjoy playing that. I'm going to write a few sort of tunes. That's very satisfying. Also, I've started running, which might be of a man of my vintage, a sort of a cry for help. But I've been doing it for the last 5 or 6 years, and I always used to think, why do that? And then I started it myself and thought, actually, this is actually quite good. I must say it's quite addictive, but you do feel quite good doing it, and it makes a difference in your physique as well. And I find as well, when I do go running, I'm more awake and receptive to various things, and I enjoy that. As to whether I'm getting high on my own chemicals, I'm not sure, but I do enjoy running, and it's also a bit of, dare I say, displacement activity from the blank page, and it does help you think as well. I do think about characters and plots when I'm running as well, so that's quite helpful.
What's your favourite and least favourite aspect of writing, and why?
Favourite, I think, is when you've sort of finished the first draft and then you're into the redrafting. I do like that, because I think I've got this, but it's not there yet. Where are the bits that are wrong with it, and where can I play around, and what do I need to do? And it's because you've got something, you can then start to dissect it and do something with it, and that's quite nice to be able to do that. My least favourite is that's writing. It's hard work. Writing is hard work. Because of that, I've got to be really ready and know I want to write, to be able to write, because otherwise it becomes painful and almost destructive in your own mind, because you might have an idea in your head, but you can't realise it properly as you want it on the page. And that is dreadful when you're completely stuck. And you've got this idea and it's not working. And that's just so go for a run, do something else, come back to it. It's just, at the moment, that is.
Can you share 3 lesser known facts about yourself?
Okay, 3 lesser known facts. Okay, one is I'm a knitter, and I've knitted virtually all my life, ever since from early teenhood, so jumpers and all sorts of things, and I do sort of knitting art things as well, where I can mix of spherical balls and flowers and animals and some artwork as well. So I quite enjoy that, and that's a way of, you can watch a lot of TV and box sets whilst knitting as well. So it doesn't feel like I'm wasting time. I'm actually gaining time because I'm doing 2 things at once. Another thing was I once had a football trial for Pudsey Juniors, who is the junior team for Leeds United back in the day. I only had one trial, but at least it was a trial. So it was one game, but I wasn't asked to go back again. But at least I had that trial, and that's quite nice thing. And the third thing as well is my family, my father's a typical surname from Friesland, the north of the Netherlands, which has its language. And Baard in Fries means the bearded one. And I used to have a beard until a few years ago, so I was bearded. But the word Baard, bearded, was then sort of transferred into a bard, as in a poet. So you can imagine you have a bearded poet, which sort of makes sense. So I suppose my surname is about being a bearded writer of sorts. So I quite like that. Quite like that connection.
Thank you very much for sharing your time with me and for this interview. I really appreciate it.
And that's been a pleasure. It's been great. Thanks.